To learn now that he was mid-haircut when they made the arrest about 30 miles from this park, even more chilling, in addition to his background as a teacher.
The quiet state of Arkansas has always been known for its rolling landscapes, peaceful parks, and tight-knit communities.
Yes, I think this is an example of really excellent police work, law enforcement work, and in cooperation with the public.
But every now and then, a dark story emerges that shakes those communities to their very core.
I think that they very quickly asked for tips from the public to get any photos, videos, coverage, any information they could from the public.
One of those stories recently surfaced when a brutal murder in an Arkansas park led investigators down a trail they never expected.
And they released a photo of this individual, evidently that from behind that someone had taken on the hiking trail. And I think that, again, I don't have all the details, but I suspect that they had a description of the vehicle and that there were probably license plate or cameras.
A trail that may point to something far more chilling. Authorities are now exploring the possibility that the suspect in custody is not just responsible for one crime, but may in fact be a serial killer who is hidden in plain sight. This case has captivated national attention because it seems to blend everything we fear about random acts of violence. The serenity of a public space shattered, the possibility of a calculated predator walking freely among families, and the haunting reality that this might not have been his first time. Let's break down the timeline of the Arkansas Parks murder, the suspect who was arrested, and why experts now believe he could be connected to other crimes. The story is not just about one tragedy. It could potentially expose a far-reaching string of killings that no one had pieced together until now. The murder in the park the story begins in one of Arkansas's beautiful state parks, the kind of place where families go to camp, hike, or simply enjoy the fresh air. It was supposed to be a normal day, but everything changed when park officials discovered the body of a victim in a wooded area. The murder shocked the community, not only because of its brutality, but because of where it happened. Parks are considered safe, a refuge from crime-ridden cities. To have a killing happen in a place meant for recreation sent waves of fear across Arkansas. People suddenly began to question whether they could take their children out on the trails, or whether an ordinary walk could turn deadly. Law enforcement immediately locked down the area and began combing through the evidence. The body showed signs of a violent attack, which told investigators this wasn't an accident or a sudden fight gone wrong. This was intentional, and as detectives studied the scene, they began to notice details that suggested the killer had experience. The placement of the body, the way the crime seemed to leave little trace behind. It didn't look like the work of someone committing violence for the first time. Identifying the suspect after days of interviews, collecting surveillance footage from nearby entrances, and analyzing forensic evidence, investigators zeroed in on a suspect. His name has not only been tied to this crime, but whispers began to surface that this wasn't his first brush with the law. Neighbors described him as quiet, often keeping to himself, but with flashes of strange behavior. Some recalled odd comments he had made in the past, while others remembered incidents that didn't quite sit right, but were brushed off as eccentricities. It wasn't until this murder that those memories came flooding back, painting a portrait of someone who may have lived with dark impulses for years. When a suspect was taken into custody, authorities began searching his home, his electronic devices, and his past movements. That's when the chilling possibility came into focus. Investigators discovered that he had traveled extensively across Arkansas and even into neighboring states. His pattern of movement seemed to align with several unsolved cases, including disappearances and murders in wooded areas. Why investigators believe he could be a serial killer at first glance. This looked like a tragic but isolated crime. However, several factors pushed investigators to consider a far darker possibility. The crime scene behavior the suspect's past, the geographic pattern, psychological profile echoes of other cases. The Arkansas Park murder case reminds many experts of other times when killers went unnoticed for years. Often, serial offenders hide behind normalcy, keeping jobs, families, or outward appearances that make them seem harmless. Neighbors may think of them as strange, but rarely dangerous until the truth comes out. In this case, the fact that the suspect may have operated in public spaces like parks makes the fear even worse. Parks are open, filled with strangers, and easy to access. Unlike crimes that occur in private homes, killings in these places can appear random and difficult to trace. If this suspect is connected to multiple killings, it would mean that countless families never received closure for their missing loved ones. Suddenly, a crime that once seemed like a horrifying but isolated tragedy could turn into a story of a predator who has stalked communities for years. The investigation expands as soon as authorities began considering the serial killer angle. The investigation grew larger. Detectives from other states started contacting Arkansas officials to compare notes on their own cold cases. Reports surfaced of law enforcement reopening files, cross-referencing DNA, and testing old evidence with new technology. The FBI also stepped in, lending resources and analysts to look at the bigger picture. The question wasn't just did he kill in Arkansas, but rather how far does this go? Every time investigators pieced together another potential connection, the scope of the case widened. This wasn't just about one park or one victim. It was about unraveling a possible web of violence stretching across years. The community reaction for the people of Arkansas, especially those living near the parks, the fear was overwhelming. Suddenly, places that had always been safe, places where kids learned to ride bikes, families picnicked, and couples walked, felt sinister. Every shadow in the woods seemed threatening. Every stranger's glance suspicious. Community meetings were held where residents demanded answers from law enforcement. Some questioned how a suspect like this could have gone unnoticed for so long. Others simply wanted reassurance that their families were safe. At the same time, the victims' families began speaking out. For them, the news was both devastating and oddly relieving. On one hand, they had to confront the brutal reality of how their loved ones may have died. On the other, they finally had the possibility of answers after years of silence. Who was the suspect, really? The most unsettling part of this case is the duality of the suspect's life. To some, he was a neighbor, a coworker, or just another man living a quiet life in Arkansas. But to others, especially to the families of the victims, he may have been something entirely different, a predator hiding in plain sight. What makes serial killers so frightening is often not their outward appearance, but their ability to mask what they are. They shop at the same grocery stores, attend the same community events, and even offer polite smiles in passing. But underneath that mask, there can be an obsession with control, power, and violence. As details about the suspect's personal life come out, it may help explain how he was able to keep his darker side hidden. Often, serial offenders learn to compartmentalize, living double lives until they make a mistake. The future of the case, now that the suspect is in custody, the next chapter of the story will unfold in the courtroom. Prosecutors will present evidence of the Arkansas Park murder, and the defense will attempt to challenge it. But beyond the trial for this single crime, investigators will continue digging into his past. The most pressing question is whether he will be charged with additional murders. If new evidence ties him to other cases, prosecutors could eventually paint him as one of the most dangerous serial killers Arkansas has ever seen. This case could also spark changes in how law enforcement handles potential serial cases. Cold case units may receive more funding, parks may increase security, and the public may become more vigilant about reporting suspicious behavior. The Arkansas Parks murder started as a local tragedy, but has grown into a story with national implications. What began as one crime may reveal the hidden path of a serial predator who has haunted multiple communities. For now, the state waits anxiously as investigators piece together the truth. If the suspicions are correct, then this arrest is more than just justice for one victim. It could bring closure to many families who have lived in the dark for far too long. And perhaps most importantly, it will remind us all of the importance of vigilance, awareness, and the idea that evil doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Because sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not lurking in the shadows. They are walking quietly among us, hiding in the ordinary, waiting for the moment to strike.